Hi, now I will talking about the introduction of these three countries, which is Afghanistan, Malaysia and Canada. Afghanistan is a lower income. Currently population in 2020 have been reached, which is 38,928,336, and by 2021, which is 1 July, have been recorded the population which is 39,007,747 population. In that estimated that in 1 year, it shows that they have been increased in 1 million population. The population in the percentage is up to 0.5% of the world total population, ranked in 87 country in population among nations. Also, as we can see, because of too many population in the country, Afghanistan have been recorded as the poorest nation in the world. In Malaysia, which is the upper middle income, Malaysia has a mixed economic system with a mixture of private liberty planning and the central economic planning and government regulation. Malaysia is one of the top 20 economies in the world in terms of competitiveness. This country have been dominated for natural resources, but in terms of medical, science and tourism, it's still growing. Malaysia also the Islamic world's 7th largest economy in GDP. And lastly, for Canada country, which is the high income, Canada is the world's 2nd largest country by total area after Russia. These countries are having a well in terms of economy and the income of the population is in good rate. This country is high development based economy and they is the 9th largest GDP by nominal and 15th largest in GDP in the world. By that, we can see how successful is that the Canada country is. Currently, population in 2019, they have been reached 37,590,000 population. A higher income country as Canada is the world leader in the production of many natural resources, such as gold, diamond lead, crude petroleum, and many more. The country are being successful and have been the 2nd largest oil reservoirs. We surely know that Canada is rich with a lot of natural resources.
First of all, I will introduce what is inflation. Inflation is seen as a key determinant of the future economic circumstance, with each economic principle aim being to achieve long-term economic growth. It is including the interest rate, potential productions, exchange rate, money supply, wage rate, trade openness, and expectation should be all the addresses when assessing monitoring the effects of inflation's level. The Federal Reserve has not established a formal inflation target, but policymakers generally believe that an acceptable inflation rate is around 2% or bit below of it. So, the lower the inflation rate, it is better. We will continue to discuss about the differences inflation rate for this country in 2015 and 2020. I will start with the inflation rate for the Afghanistan. As we can see in this box, there are two different inflation rates for Afghanistan, which is in 2015 the inflation rate is negative 0.63%. It is quite good, and only a few nations were able to attain negative inflations, resulting in lower price levels and lower CPI. However, as a general rule, a greater inflation rate causes a depreciation of a country currency in respect to the trade partner, which leads to higher interest rate. In 2020, Afghanistan average inflation rate drastically increasingly to 5.6% that are actually worrying to the country economies. The inflation rate is the Afghanistan country. How about Malaysia, Farah?
According to the table, it shows that there is two Malaysia's comparison in inflation from 2015 to 2020. Firstly, in 2015, Malaysia inflation was recorded at 2.10% and decreased sharply in 2020 by negative 1.14%, which has reached a negative level. It decreased by 0.66% in the past 5 years.
From the table above illustrate two different years of inflation rate in 2015 and 2020. As stated in the table, the country of Canada, we can see that in the year of 2015, Canada has a very high inflation at 1.13%, while in the year of 2020, Canada has slowed down the graph to 0.72%.
Factors that actually influencing the inflation rate for Afghanistan is first, it is because of the failure of commercializing the resource. As we all know, Afghanistan has a very good agriculture resource that can be commercialized. But why their resources are still can be accounted as deficit? It is because they don't have enough and higher technology machines that can be utilized all of the resources that they have. For example, only around 1.2 million hectare of the total irrigated area of 3.2 million hectare are utilized for agriculture due to a lack of facilities and traditional irrigation method. The remaining 1.8 million hectare remaining underutilized. The amount of the accessible water should be sufficient to meet current and future needs, but it is underutilized. Only 20 billion cubic meter of the available water is being used out of total 75 BCM. Better infrastructure, water management and farming technique are necessary to close the gap. The second factors that lead in higher inflation in this country because of their vulnerability and reliance on foreign help. Employment in low productivity agriculture is centered in the private sector, which is highly restricted. 44% of the total workforce work in agriculture and 60% of the household derive some income from agriculture. Because of their old agriculture equipment, they cannot survive to give the employment placement to all their citizens. It is causes their citizens need to go out from the country to find the opportunities, or else they will be hungry. Insecurities, political instabilities, poor institutions, limited infrastructure, pervasive corruptions, and a tough business climate style. Private sector growth and diversification also leads to this inflation become worse.
The total inflation outlook in Malaysia in 2020 is influenced by global oil and commodity price movement. Domestic fuel price floated at the lower rate due to the fall in world oil prices caused by the trade war between the US and China. Many essential commodities have seen a considerable drop in demand as a result of crisis. Global oil prices plummeted and a result of international lockdown, which resulted in a major drop in Malaysia demand for energy items.
In Canada, the factor that influence the inflation are Canadian buy many goods and services and government unconcerned about inflation. Statistics Canada tracks the prices for a long list. Many of goods and services prices track. Canadians typically consume and buy many goods and services. This will influence the average price of the item add up, known as the Consumer Price Index or CPI. In most cases, Canadians are unconcerned about inflation. Since 1991, the Government of Canada and the Bank of Canada agreed that low, stable and predictable inflation would benefit Canadians. Their agreement made the bank responsible for bringing the inflation down to around 2% and then keeping it between 1% and 3%. The bank has been successful in keeping inflation near 2%. The bank adjusts, raises or lowers its key policy interest rate to achieve the inflation target. If inflation exceeds the bank's target, the policy rate may be raised. This causes banks and to raise interest on deposit, loan and mortgage. Higher interest rates promote saving while discouraging borrowing and consequently spending.
Following the recent COVID-19 outbreak is higher, the number of inflation rate that causes the youth have turned to drug addictions and illegal migration due to a weakened political environment, insecurities, higher price of consumer goods and daily lower income, economic circumstance and unemployment. Some of the society's teenagers members are even involved in illegal acts including as looting and killing, and have linked to irresponsible armed and organizations of crime syndicate. The second one is due to the shortage caused by trade restrictions of COVID-19 outbreaks, border closure, and perhaps hoarding. Food inflation more than tripled in the first half of 2020 from 2.5% a year earlier to 5.3%. Non-food inflation remained modest at 0.8%. Export declined by 28% in the first half of 2020 compared to same time by the previous year to the declining remittances. Import fell by 24%, but the current account surplus increased as a result of increased external grant inflows. In June 2020, foreign reserve topped 9 billion for the first time, representing 15 months of the imports. This occurred despite that Afghanistan banks frequent US dollar auctions, which attempt to keep the currency rate steady.
The pattern of household consumption spending is also beginning to change, where they are spending on health item is now giving a priority, and in turn has increased price due to high demand. The level of trade in a country is largely determined by the foreign exchange rate. Malaysia's currency rate for $1 in March 2019 was 4 ringgit and 8, and it has since declined to 4 ringgit 20 cents in July 2020. As the cost of imported raw materials rises, weaker exchange rate will contribute to cause post-inflation.
The rise in the Consumer Price Index in Canada was almost entirely driven by food prices, particularly lettuce and fresh or frozen chicken. Plus, the price of the meat, baked goods and vegetables was a greatest increase, reflecting the pandemic-related challenges. Due to COVID-19, Canadians were asked to stay at home by the government, and the demand to the food and frozen food, essential goods are rising. A price war for oil and depreciation of the Canadian currency were also major reasons. The record low oil prices at the start of the pandemic pushed down the value of the Canadian dollar. That made it more expensive to bring vegetables, fruits and other food into Canada. To add up, the cost to bring those goods is rising too. That is why the price of the goods and services in Canada rise as well. Another related issue in country is housing prices continue to rise in Canada. The rate of Canada's house ownership is likely around 66%, and the majority of Canadians who do not own a home rent a leased house, apartment, or suite from a landlord or property business. Due to COVID-19, as people started working from home more often, people want to buy their own house to get comfortable, to get comfort. So some of the folks who own condos and smaller homes can take the opportunity to build up assets and move to a property that better meets their needs. Besides, people started to move to rural and suburban areas as they do not have to live within commuting distance from their jobs.
In conclusion that have been shown in this topic about inflation based on three countries, which is Afghanistan, Malaysia and also Canada, we see that the inflation is rise in the general level of the price and the service in economy. It plays the vital role for the development in the economy. It also can see that whether each of the country are being in good state of the economy or not based on the rate of each year. When inflation are being slow, employment is expected to increase. The consumer should have more money because of they can purchase what they need and don't have to borrow from the bank, and in that situation will come to the decrease of the state in the rate of the economic statistic. And lastly, inflation is the biggest flex in certain country. It shows that countries are stable, or they will probably be facing a challenge in conducting the economy state for the good of the country and also the good for the people.